All right, Ben Smith from Real Property Management, Metro Detroit, rising star in our rent scale community. Excited to have you here. Ben, love for you to introduce yourself. Just kind of talk about the market you're in, the size of your company, and kind of what you were doing before you got into the business development management role.
Yeah, Ben, last name Smith, originally from Chicago, moved to Michigan in 2007. What attracted me to the market, my son, he was living out here. He was probably one at the time in the area. And when I first got here, I realized Detroit has the ability to be the Miami of the North. And a lot of people didn't understand that. I was like, had a big artist scene. It sits right on an international waterway, like Canada's literally across the street. And property at that time, you could get like a mini mansion for about $25,000. So people didn't really kind of understand like what they were sitting on in the city to have all those things going for them. And now that things are starting to pick up, people are starting to realize like, hey, we were really sitting on gold. Previous to me getting involved in real estate, I was working with a company out of Highland Park, Michigan, and we had a contract with Audi and Volkswagen, and I was more of like a liaison, team lead, sales trainer for that organization. And sometimes when you're dealing with big companies, it takes a long time to kind of steer the bus in a different direction. And as technology advances, as customers change, you need to be nimble. And sometimes in those big companies, you know, anything that we see now from a lot of major companies, probably something they will start working on 4 years ago. So,
Yeah.
and we know technology moves so fast, companies, industry, everything is moving so fast, and you don't want to be left behind. But I knew I wanted to be into real estate because I have kind of a obsession with watching HGTV, and one of my biggest games when I'm watching it, I can just look at a property and tell, like, oh, they probably put about 25,000 in that, and people are like, how do you know that? Like, it's just knowledge that I have. So when the opportunity presented itself to come over to RPM Metro Detroit, I definitely took the interview. Mike, who was one of the original owners, brought me aboard. Him and Michelle, and it's probably been about a year and a half or so, and we've been rocking out.
That's great. Like I said, rising star in our community. We're loving to see it. You've been so proactive. Just give us so for anybody else, reading or watching, give us a sense of the company size, door count, number of years in business. How would you introduce yourself at RPM?
Yeah, so we've been in business. The company itself has been established for over 15 years. We're probably working with a staff of 17, some odd people. From a door count, I think we're probably, I look at it as a property because sometimes we have multi-family units. So I would say from a property standpoint, we're probably like 500, but maybe 575, 580 in actual individual doors. And
Yeah,
that's what we've been focusing on, is trying to increase, trying to see what's more profitable, single family versus multi-family property. So that's something we're constantly trying to figure out where we shine at and where we need to be like, we don't really work well in those areas. So
that's great. Getting to know your product, getting to know
yeah,
your client. We talk about it all the time, right? Know your misfits versus your ideal fits. Sounds like you
yep,
guys are doing that. So you've been in the role just over a year, is that correct? You're in a
that's
few
correct.
months?
Yeah, you in a few months. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your velocity like? How many doors are you expecting to close per month? What are your goals? So walk us through what success looks like for you.
Yeah, when I first started, it was kind of hard to measure last year because I was just new. I was just kind of learning everything. So uh, we were just kind of looking at like 5, 7 doors, and I was probably averaging about 12 last year. And I came in like May of last year and getting everything started. So we were had a lot of partnerships, and I was just kind of shoring up, and just being brand new to the business, not knowing anything. I already just knew like, oh, you want to build partnerships with people. You want to build partnership with investors. It's just easy. It's working smarter, not harder. You want to take those phone calls that come in from investors serious, because sometimes as a salesperson, if they're not looking to buy right now, you're like, I don't want to have this conversation. But I just learned that, like, let's talk about it. I said, before you get out there and you buy a property in an area that nobody's going to manage, let's see what your strategy is, and I'm gonna tell you what you should be doing. And if you like it, let's do business. And those conversations have paid off. People I spoke to last May have just out of the blue called me like, hey, we spoke last year. Are you still doing it? I'm like, oh yeah. And it's now starting to bear fruit. And that's one thing Reese is always talking like sometimes things don't materialize right away, but it would eventually work its way back around to you. So
I think this is the superpower of sales that people don't realize is time. Like
yeah.
the people, the people I'm talking to right now in September of 2024 might be the
Hmm.
people that are buying from me in September of 2025 or
That's right.
2027, right?
That's right.
And most people don't have the patience for that. They're like, "Hey, it's not working." I talk to them, right? But like we got to let our buyers be buyers. Like we got
Yeah,
to be the one they pick when they're ready to pick somebody. But the one thing we don't control is timeline. Uh,
exactly.
and I'm just seeing you be proactive. And that's why, actually, Reese said, "Hey, you got to talk to Ben. Like this guy is just super proactive." That was my kind of takeaway coming in the call. So knowing that you just can't refresh Lead Simple and stare at the phone and just
Yeah.
wait for people to call and buy, what are you doing to be proactive? Because I'm hearing good things about this.
One thing is when I first here, they was talking about Mike, the previous owner was kind of training me on him and Michelle was saying that we want to build, working with realtors. So as somebody who didn't know jack about the business, I don't know, I didn't have any knowledge. I just decided to work with people who brought us tenants to kind of get my feet wet and at least having the conversation. So if you brought us a tenant who rented out a property, it was an easy introduction for me to call you and say, hey, Jeremy, back in March, you brought us a tenant. I just want to let you know that we do offer property management services. So if you know someone who's has a property they don't know if they want to sell, if they want to rent out, send them my way. I can walk them through the process. But also, this is a great way for you to build a database so you can tap back into if the rates change, if they want to sell it. Also, you have a tenant database. If they've been paying rent, now they want to be homeowners, you can send them a card and say, hey, interest rates are coming down, grant money is in your city, let's see what we can do. I was like, so I would just it was an easier conversation for me to get into just being brand new. A lot of the BDMs that were I sit on the meetings with, they had like years of at least real estate experience. I was just coming from like some TV shows. Like I had no knowledge, but I could definitely say I'm further along in my knowledge of this business than I was last year.
Well, it was great, but not just knowledge. Like you were taking activity, like you were
Yeah,
doing activities. Is what I'm seeing, like talking to realtors. You're out there presenting. In a moment, I'm going to ask you about kind of your expertise because I think that's like a
yeah.
superpower of yours. But it sounds like you weren't just sitting on your hands, like
No,
you're out
no.
there talking to people. So what else were you doing to grow your portfolio?
Yeah, so yeah, you can't really rely on just the PPC leads or the pay per clicks or whatever's through Lead Simple or going back to some of the old leads. You really have to be out there networking. I'm part of the business development group in our city for Troy, talking to them. But you also have to have a great knowledge of the market, and you have to have a conversation that nobody's going to have. I always tell people anybody can collect rent and fix toilets, but when you talk about property as asset management, not a lot of people that kind of puts a light bulb in people's head. I was like, if you don't do this thing right, this can cost you more money than what you've paid for it. So having those with conversation with investor groups, having it with individual homeowners, having just you have to get out there. You really have to start with like a soft market with like the real estate agents, and then you have to join like a business development group. Uh, I did BNI for a little bit. It didn't really pan out, but just working with the Chamber of Commerce in our city, it opened up a lot of doors because like I said, I was green to the industry, so I didn't have any negative connotations. I didn't have any fears. It's like a mechanic. If you're a mechanic, it's always this negative thing about, oh, the mechanic's going to take advantage of me. So when I went to a business development meeting for our city, people were more interested to talk to me than anything. They wasn't like, oh, here go the horrible property management people. They were like, oh no, tell us more. How do we do this? And I was kind of taken aback at how many real estate agents had been in the business for years and didn't know anything about property management. So just having it, so it wasn't. I didn't have a negative experience, so I was just able to, even with my little knowledge at that time, I was able to have those conversations with confidence. And now people kind of rely on us, or they call us to ask questions, and we can help manage them through. So now we're pivoting. That now that we made the introduction, we've made friends. Now we're having a conversation like, hey, let me just take this off your plate. Interest rates about to go down in a few months. You about to be inundated. The whole NAR thing about buyers agreements. It's just too much. You don't have time to manage this. Go ahead, transfer them over to us. Let us handle all the day to day. check in with me about your database of people. We can get you the referral money, which is whether it's 400, 200, it's not a lot, but the time, I think I learned from rent scale, the cost of acquisition, the time that you're losing dealing with this, you're
Yeah,
not getting that. So I kind of incorporate that into our conversations now. But first is just getting the name out there, showing yourself friendly, showing yourself knowledgeable, and then pivoting everybody in their mindset. So,
that's
and we
great.
actually do better business in the winter as far as signing up people because everybody says it's slow. I tell people, no, this is the best time. I say, because what we're going to do is work on your property all winter. So when spring hits, you ready. Everybody else is going to be trying to get ready. You're going to be ready because we've already did the certification. We've already redid the bathrooms. We've already painted. We've already tested the market. So people are like, oh yeah. So I don't ever look at it as being a slow time. It's just the time to kind of be prepared. So
Yeah, it's great. And that local knowledge expertise, Ben, we don't go way back, but we've been talking for a while. And like the funny thing is like you never tell me about real property management Metro Detroit, which is good. But what I'm getting from you is you just want to talk about real estate investing. Like
yeah.
you just want to be a peer with your clients.
Oh yeah.
And that's something I saw, like like some of you heard about, and just kind of this trusted advisor thing. If I called you, you're not going to be like, "Hey, hire me. Here are my fees. Here's what I'm
No.
doing." You're just going to be like, "Hey, how do we manage this property?" Am I
Right.
right? Like you got some
Yeah.
trusted advisor in you for sure.
Yeah, so I always ask them, which throws a lot of people off, whether you accidental landlord, whether you're a self manager or you're an investor. I say, well, what's your goal? That's like rent scale 101. What's your goal with the property?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think about it. I said, are you a buy and holder? Are you looking to flip and cash out and take a vacation, buy a Mercedes? Why did you get into um, trying to buy property in the first place? Then that's probably a more layman's term of asking, what's your
Mhm.
goal? Why did you buy these properties in the first place? And that's when people open up and tell you, then that can kind of steer how I advise you. If you're looking to build a retirement, and I say, well, are you trying to retire off rent money or are you trying to retire off appreciation? So then we further breaking down the conversation. And if they saying rent money, then I was like, well, no one is really, unless you starting with 45 units, grossing, I mean, netting you 1,000 a month, you're not really, we talking slim margins on some certain things. So
Sure.
I have to change their focus. I said, well, so we walked through process with the property you're looking at, you probably pay 50, you probably put 10 in it, we probably get 1,300, whatever the mortgage rates, you're probably going to clear about 300. Of course, that's not going to make you rich. Like, it's probably barely covering cable. I said, but as I said, as the property appreciates, and as you can see, this area that you purchase in
Yeah.
is at 6% growth, when as opposed to some areas only doing 2 and 3. When you're ready to sell or pull equity out, you're at a greater position than some of your counterparts. I said, so you're not necessarily going to get rich. I don't want to discourage you. You're not taking a loss. I said, you're not taking a loss, but you're not just making as much as you anticipate. I said, but this is how you begin
Yeah.
to make as much money. And that's an easier conversation to have as opposed with the accidental landlord who's just like, oh, I was working in Michigan, Florida called me and I got to move. But so I don't have that conversation with them out the gate. That's like a follow up conversation we had once we get a
Yeah.
tenant in and we circle back around. So,
I love it. I would just add to that, which it's like, hey, it's not you paying the mortgage off, it's somebody else. So
yeah,
add to that, it's like, hey, 15 years from now, you might be able to refinance that equity out.
yep,
Take, 100, $200,000 out of that property, tax free, by the way, and let somebody
exactly.
else keep paying for it, right?
Yep.
So that's the multidimensional aspect that like, yeah, it's just not, no one's teaching us this, right?
But,
Only we knew about this, which is
but
important.
I think because of so much TikTok information that's out there, what these TikTok, Instagram, you having a more v- educated investor. They may not know all the fine details of everything, but
Yeah.
they can definitely talk about the BRRR method of
Yeah.
purchasing property. So as a property manager, you have to be versed, or as a business development manager, you have to be versed at
Yeah.
least in that particular conversation. Because sometimes people
Yeah.
wake up, see a TikTok like, oh, I could buy a house and I could put a Section 8 tenant and that, and it just sounds more easier than what it is. And it's my job to like, this is the actual details that are going to
Yeah.
get you to that point. So I am seeing a more educated investor, and that's what I tell my staff. Uh, when I sent a property over, I was like, I said before we were getting a lot of people who were just kind of gun happy with buying properties. Now we get more educated people. So if you don't say something right, they're gonna know. And it just kind of
Yeah.
related to the car industry. When the internet opened up and you had access to all the invoices, the old tricks of the car industry couldn't work anymore. Because like I got the same information you got. So when the information doesn't match up, it's like, I don't know if I can trust that person. So as long as we're speaking the same language, we're building trust because your research looked like my research. So it's like, okay, good. You know what you're talking about. So
Well, okay, so now you're hitting on one of my favorite subjects, Ben, which is
uh,
we're all drowning in information, but we're hungry for clarity.
yeah,
So yeah, like you can Google anything, you get a bunch of information,
yeah,
but, so Ben, I'm trying to build a portfolio diversified across the whole country. I'm looking
mhm,
for markets that are exciting to me, that I can invest in, and I can find, I actually have an amazing advantage that I have the whole Rin scale network. So I can call guys like you and be like, hey, I'll invest in a town where I like, I got a guy I can trust, right?
right,
And trust is something that you've not said, but that I've seen you demonstrate. But local knowledge expertise. I'm down here in Boca Raton, Florida, and
right,
like I just got people moving from Boston and New York, and they just got nothing but money to spend, and they're buying properties. It's different, it's on fire, but Detroit, right?
yeah,
And so when people call you, if I called you, I'm like, hey, what do I need to know about? Like you've really like kind of built your expertise on local expertise and being a trusted advisor. So if I'm calling you from a guy in South Florida and say, hey, I got a property I'm going to invest in, I want to talk to you guys. Like, what would you tell me about Detroit?
yeah. That's the call we get. Everybody always calls about Detroit, 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 and I would say Detroit is great. It's not the same Detroit as it was 2007, 2005, 2010, even 2020.
Thank goodness, right?
Thank goodness, right? So with that being said, a lot of investors, uh, they get excited. They do call from Florida. They want to buy property, and and this is why I don't want to see you as I don't even know you, but I don't want to see you get into a bad situation that's not going to be profitable. So I always tell people, Detroit is great. I said you're not going to get the same deals as you once were. I said so if you're buying a house for the cost of a used Honda Accord, this ain't 2005 where it's going to be 6 bedrooms, marble floors. Like either it's going to be in a neighborhood that nobody wants to manage in, whether it be me or any other company, or it's going to need so much rehab work that it may not be worth the investment. So I always tell people Detroit is cool, but look at the outskirts of the city as well. Because what people don't know is that let's say I have $1,000 to spend on rent as a tenant. If I take my $1,000 to Detroit, now my car insurance is going to be higher, which plays a factor. So the difference in car insurance, I could be paying $400 a month for car insurance in Detroit. I can cross 8 Mile, Jefferson, Telegraph. Now my insurance is 175 a month. So it's not from a tenant perspective. It's not always just about what the rent is. It's about my other expenses. So I tell owners, if a tenant comes with $1,000 and you're so gung ho about Detroit, but your competing investor built
Mhm.
same property across the street with better city services. When they call the police, they're going to come out quickly. They're going to pave the roads. They're going to shovel the snow. That $1,000 may go a little bit further across the street than it would as a tenant, because all those things plays a factor into it. They like, oh, I didn't think about that. I said, yeah. If you had $1,000 to spend, you want to stay downtown Boston, or would you rather go out to the outskirts and pay a little bit less and have all your costs? Like, oh, that's a good point. So I always tell people from a tenant perspective, you have to think that way. And also, I said there's so many development projects going on. I said single family homes are still pretty good, but don't shy away from duplexes because sometimes people get intimidated about a duplex because it's so big and they think like, oh, this is like fixing two houses at one. And sometimes some of the walkthroughs are more scarier than what they actually are. So I say if you're an experienced investor or you're experienced flipper, don't shy away from them because that's where you're going to find your deals at is on those duplexes. I said luxury building apartment sounds good. It's a big feat. Don't jump into it just yet. We have two projects that just went up, and I think those projects have pushed down the rents of the other projects because you're looking at 2,000 a month, 700 square feet, but you're overlooking Detroit and Canada. But eventually, somebody's going to be like, I don't want to be spending 2,000 a month for 700 square feet and I can hear my neighbor cooking and making noise. I want to stretch out a little bit. So I always tell people don't shy away from those single family homes. I stay averse to loan products that are out there now. I work with a few mortgage brokers who have some other alternative. Not it's not even hard money. It's just different ways they're looking at. They can use the anticipated rent now to figure out whether your mortgage payment would be and what your
Yeah.
payoff time will be. So I just kind of use all those tools to give them. So before they step into the market, they'll have a better understanding. And I do have like a sheet of areas that are hotter than others. From a sometimes it's from a crime statistic, sometimes it's from a violent crime statistic, sometimes it's from a appreciation statistic that I just tell like, hey, if somebody's trying to charge you 15 for a house, I already know what area code you're in. How did you know that? I was like, because that's what those houses know, but you're not going to see the increase. So
Wow. Okay. Got it. You got it down by like zip code. You've
yeah,
got
I got that by zip
charts
code.
you're ready to talk to. So it sounds like a lot of your clients are calling you as they're buying. They're not like,
Yeah,
hey, I got this property at 123, Mango Street. They're calling
right.
saying, hey, I wanna buy here. Like, what do you think? Like, is that a big part of your
Yeah,
lead?
that is, yeah.
Yeah.
And I entertain those people. I don't blow them off and blah. I know
Yeah.
I talk to them. I say this. I'm gonna tell you why you should buy here. I'm gonna tell you why you shouldn't
Yeah.
buy here. I'm gonna tell you what areas, what areas to go to next. Those type of things. I'm gonna tell you what areas you probably already priced out of, without even looking at your financial report. And it's like, oh yeah. So
And let me ask you that, like lead source wise, why are these people calling you? Like, are you guys doing something that's attracting investors, or you just got great SEO? And if I'm gonna buy in Detroit, I'm just gonna Google you and I'm gonna find you. Like,
I
what?
just
Why
think
are you having so many phone calls like that?
I just think people Google property management companies in places they want to buy, and they just because when I've been like we have a rent scale meeting with our particular group with Reese, I think some of those guys get those calls too. But I just take the time to entertain them. I was like, I'm gonna talk to you, and I'm gonna give you my information. I'm gonna tell you how we do this, and I always because I always learned from sales years ago. You always want to cover your tail, so I would say, hey, if you I know you're talking to other people, but if they're not talking about this, they're not talking about this, they may not be educated for your particular need to handle what you're trying to do. So I always try to cover my flank in those conversations. So
Yeah.
6 years from now, 2 years from now, 6 months from now, they just call back and say, hey, we spoke. And they've been definitely paying off.
All right, it was great. So, what on that note, I want you to lean into that. We got on the call, you were telling me about all kinds of local intel that you had in
Yeah.
Detroit. So,
Well,
if I'm calling you and I'm like, hey, where do I want to be buying? Like, what would you say about where I want to be buying?
I would tell them from a zip code perspective, I'm gonna say you probably already missed the ball on the single digit zip codes like 0201. I was like, the west side of Detroit has a great appreciation. Uh, we talk about doing your due diligence. I always tell people don't let any realtor that you work with, don't let them recommend an inspector. Find your own independent inspector. I was like, because what happens is Detroit has some beautifully constructed homes. They're old. Some of the systems are old. I say, I don't want to see you lose your shirt because the pipes are rusty. Now you got a $20,000 sewer job. So that's the type of advice that I give people. They're like, oh, I didn't think about that. I was like, those are the type of things that you have to take into consideration when you want to be an investor. I said, it's not as easy as it look on TikTok. I was like, but you're going to find some great deals. And I walk them through the zip code. Sometimes they have a zip code in which they want to invest in, but I would tell them why they should, why they shouldn't. But for people who just calling out the blue, I say West. Then when it comes to the east side of Detroit, I tell them these particular parts. When we talk about the outskirts, suburbs, obviously you're going to pay a little bit more for the property. I said, but it's probably going to have more applications than the actual city because people who are from the city know that hey, if I can cross 8 Mile, if I can cross Jefferson, I'm gonna get more bang for my buck. And even some of our Section 8 calls, I said Detroit is not. Is I mean, you can still do Section 8 in Detroit, but it's not like it was years ago where you about to. I said a lot of those properties have moved to the outskirts of Detroit into what they call the suburbs. So
Yeah. We're talking 8 Mile. Like, I feel like I got my M&M, like,
yeah,
high
and
school days, like totally like full circle. I love it.
yeah. So when you cross 8 Mile, you hit like Ferndale, you hit Warren, and those are the areas. So
I love that. But I don't want to give away all your secrets, Ben,
yeah,
but like you did talk about, kind of the Greenway and some stuff happening. Like
yeah.
you got your finger on the pulse. Like talk about what's happening and what you're telling investors about.
when I'm talking to investors, it's good to know what's happening in the city, suburbs. When Quicken Loans moved to the city, it became this whole thing. And what happened was Quicken Loans moved to the city, and I think Dan Gilbert, who owns it,
Yep.
uh, was pulling all his companies from the suburbs to the city. So I mean, he pulled the employees, which pulls revenue from a now. If you had a taco stand, 800 people going to the taco stand, now they taking their money and they taking it downtown. So there was always this big competition between Oakland County, where a lot of businesses sit, and Detroit. And just having that knowledge it opened up the tenant pool. So no matter which state you in, no matter how long you've been in this business, people always say, "Oh, how do you prevent uh, squatters, or how do you prevent evictions?" And there's really no foolproof method, but what you can do is talk about the pool of tenants in which your particular city or state has. So because we live in Michigan, the big three is where we get our some of our tenants from. Then we have a lot of hospitals, so Beaumonts.
And just to elaborate on the big three, because I think not a lot
Yeah,
of
oh
people
yeah. So the
hear
big
that
three is
stuff.
Ford, Chrysler, and a GM,
Car makers, right?
car maker. So we have a lot of factories in the area. So some of our tenants come from the factory.
Yep.
Then we have the hospital workers. We have casinos. We have maybe two or three casinos in the metro area. We have a slowly but emerging tech community that's coming up. So when people say, how do you prevent squatters? You have to know where your tenants are coming from. So when I talk to investors, I say, well, what happened last year? Everybody was on strike last year. The auto workers was on strike. The hospitals was on, the nurses at the hospital were on strike, and the casino workers. I said, so what that means for you as an owner, rent may be a little slow, but you're going to get your money. So I say, by you investing now, the strike has already been solved. The bargaining has been completed. Now these contracts are good for another 4 to 5 years. So when you pull a tenant from the auto worker industry, they get paid like clockwork. Sometimes they get, more money if they do overtime. I said, so I mean, you can't talk to the responsibility of a person, but at least you could say, oh, this person comes from a solid background
Yeah.
perspective. And a lot of people don't discuss that. So you have to know, like, hey, if I live in Florida, who are my renters? Are they
Yeah.
retirees? Are they
What are the job centers?
international? Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they international investors? Are they call center workers? Who are these people? So those are the questions, and that's how we market. That's who we speak to.
Well, I want to ask you about that, Ben, because I'm so like this is exactly the local knowledge I'd want. If I'm thinking about
Yeah.
buying in Detroit, I'm calling you. How are you as a BDM staying up to date on that? Like, what are you reading? What are you listening to? Who are you talking to? If I got a guy down here in Boca Raton at Mango Tree Property Management, what
Mhm.
do I want to turn him on to? Like, what? How are you? Like, you're so worldly, for lack of a better word, about what's happening in your community, which I know is a total paradigm shift. But like, how do you know what's happening? Like, how are you keeping
So
track?
I think what happens is people read stock prices, they read what interest rates is, but then they roll past the article and it says 46 homes are being built on such and
Yeah,
such. And they're like, oh, okay. And a lot of people from the quote unquote suburbs, so like the Oakland County, Macomb County, they don't really come to the city because from a perspective, it's too far. So I stay on top of these things. There's a strategy from investing that say wherever they build a Starbucks is where you want to invest. I always tell people wherever they putting up a new restaurant is where you want to invest in Detroit. So I stay on top of all the new restaurants that are here. So when investors come to town, I say, "Oh, where you staying?" "Oh, I'm
mhm,
staying here." "Oh, they just put two distilleries over there. They make their own liquor and they make their own soda." Like, "Oh, okay." Because when you follow the restaurants, you follow the bars, you follow the entertainment venues, surely property around there is going to appreciate. So anytime
yeah,
there's a new restaurant, I'm on top of it. So you can follow. Sometimes, if you let's say if you're in San Francisco, they may have a like an influencer whose job is just tell you all the new hotspots. So I follow all the Detroit influencers. That's like, hey, they just built this new restaurant. It's Asian fusion. It's going to be located at such and such. And I'm like, okay, I'll write that down. And the next thing you know, when investors come in, you can kind of see property value starting to increase. And then that's how I stay on top of everything. We had this thing called the Joe Louis Greenway that's being currently being built. So the first project was the riverfront. And like I said, Detroit could be like the Miami of the North because it sits on a beautiful riverfront, and across from the river is Canada. So GM had spent donated some money, and there's actually a river conservatory who beautified that whole property. That goes from the Ambassador Bridge probably out to Belle Isle, where they did nothing but beautification, gardens, walking paths, wetlands. So they're building that up, which is a sign that, hey, greater things are starting to come. The next thing you know, people were complaining, but I was like, oh, something is coming, because they
Yeah.
started building bike lanes where there were no bike lanes. And the only time you build bike lanes when you're trying to reduce traffic. Why would you
Mhm.
reduce traffic? Because you're trying to make things more walkable. So how you gonna make it more walkable? We're gonna build more property. We're gonna build more grocery stores. We're gonna build more clothing stores. So you don't have to travel, get in your car, travel from one side of the town to another side. So those are kind of key things when you see your cities doing that. Like, you don't think it matters? It matters, because they got a plan that you may not. They don't roll out the full plan and say, hey, we about to build these parks. We about to build these bike paths because we about to put up a 90, we about to, build 90 condos. And
Yeah.
those are the first signs. So when you see that in your newspaper, just looking like, okay. And then as a BDM, as a property manager, just drive down and say, oh, okay, I see 2 dilapidated houses September of this year. Come back next month. Somebody done bought it, and then just go on the MLS and see what they paid for it. And then that's how you guide your investors.
Amazing. That was the goal. That was
It's
the
a
goal,
mouthful,
Ben.
but that's how you have to do
That's
it.
proactive. Like that's the goal. Everyone just like, hey, I just want to answer the phone and I hope you got a property and I can just, list it. Like you are putting yourself on the same side of the table as the
Mhm.
investor. You're like, hey, I'm
Yeah,
here. Here's what I'd be investing. Here's what I'm excited about. Here's what you should be excited about. You're making yourself one of them, which
yeah.
is so awesome. And you're bringing local expertise, which is
Oh
great.
yeah. But yeah, that'd be my key takeaways. Any new restaurant that pops up in your city, that's not a chain, but somebody got that's something you want to. I mean, of course they build like a Chili's or a Fridays. That's
Yeah.
whoever bought that has already developed. They'd have bought the rest of the land to develop something else. But if you find out somebody's putting up a small restaurant, because
Yeah.
in Michigan a lot of people got grants. So when you see that whatever your state capital has allotted your major city in that state, $40 million in small businesses. What they're trying to say is that, hey, we're looking for you as a small business entrepreneur to build restaurants, stores, whatever. And
Yeah.
that's something you want to pay attention to as a BDM. Like, oh, okay, so somebody's got 40 million to spend within this city and in these zones. So everything is important in, when you read the newspaper.
I love that. I'm literally taking notes because it's so good. Um, But I love it. Like not a Chili's, not a
Yeah.
Friday, but like something like, just a restaurateur that knows what they're doing, right? If they're
Mhm.
building in that area, that area is awesome.
Yeah, like you may have a favorite steakhouse out
You do?
in
Yeah.
Florida. If you hear, and he's just probably been doing it for 30 years, makes the best steaks. If you hear he's expanding to, let's say, Miami, that means somebody has lured him down there with some type of funds to come to Miami.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm thinking through of like some of the best restaurants. It is a precursor of what's about to happen.
Yep.
So I love that. So love the trusted advisor. I mean, that is really what you're doing. People don't care about whether your management fee is 9% or 10%. They care
Not a
about,
big deal.
hey,
Yeah.
I got this guy. Ben's gonna lead me in the right direction. He knows my goals. He's gonna talk to me. As you said, that was kind of Ren Scale 101. It's like, what are your
Yep.
goals? Like, what are you trying to do? What's next for you, Ben? Like, what are you excited about? Like, we're what, 9 months into the year? Like, what's the rest of the year look like for you? You doing anything exciting, anything cool that you want to share?
Yeah. So we're trying to hone in on expanding our multifamily property, because, like I said, from a city perspective, you can build. They're building luxury, and luxury changes. Where at one time having a CD player in your car was luxury.
What was luxury last year is not luxury
It's
this
not
year.
luxury this year.
Yeah, I
So
get
we're
it.
just trying to get down our numbers on doing multifamily, because a lot of what I've discovered is that not lot of multifamily properties are managed well. So I'm going after those people, and I'm practicing on my duplexes, quads, and triplexes to get down a perfected system. So when we have our 75 units, I can just jump right on it, because I could just multiply what we've already done on a smaller scale. How people are like, well, why would you be so interested in that? If you ever graduated from college and you lived in an apartment, you could tell that your apartment complex that you lived in when you first graduated, or lived in now, was not managed the best. So
Yeah,
now that you have that knowledge and you can help an owner out, why would you not? Why would I not
yeah,
jump into that? So, and even just having a conversation with people who because we can consult on them at this point. We haven't really brought any 75, but I have like a series of questions I ask these people about parking, storage, washer, dryers. Sometimes these people have so much money they don't think about the minutia. They're like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." I said, "Where are these people gonna park? Where's my guests gonna park? Oh, I didn't know about that. So you may need to buy another 4 or 5 lots around the complex so my neighbors can park or my friends can park." So just having that little knowledge and guiding them. But now we're looking to bring one on and see, is it really profitable for us? Because we know single family homes do well, but we want to see, are those projects going to be profitable? Or it just sounds good in a rent scale meeting. We're like, we have a 9,000 apartment unit, but we're not
Yeah.
making any money. So that's our next venture, is explore where else we're gonna be good at by still servicing our bread and butter. So
It sounds like you're bullish on Detroit. That's what I'm
yeah,
taking away. You feel
oh
good
yeah.
about Detroit?
Yeah, it's the the growth is definitely there. The crime is not what it used to be. I'm originally from Chicago, and people like, you in Detroit. I was like, I would rather be in Detroit than in Chicago, because what happens is, when growing up in Chicago, the places that they're having crime problem is now, we never had crime downtown Chicago. We never had crime on the north side. So
Yeah.
now that to see that, Detroit don't play that. Detroit, because
Yeah.
when you go downtown, we always joke about it's being Gan Dilbert town.
Yeah.
Uh, because it's going to be Detroit police down there. It's going to be Quicken Loan security down there. There's going to be another company down there,
Yeah.
and all the restaurants going to have their own security. I mean, we have our own Gucci store downtown now.
Nice.
And we have Savage Fenty downtown. We have a Nike store downtown. I think John Vivalos was down there one time, Lululemon, and that was something that didn't exist 2007, 2008.
All right,
So,
I'm gonna have to get out there for a Lions game. I will admit, like, I had relegated Detroit as like no man's land for years, but you're not the first person to say this to me, Ben. And like, I'm just hearing it's back. It's amazing. It sounds like they've done some great
oh
stuff.
yeah, some investing, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. All right. Just as we wrap up, Rentscale community, I heard you're sharing great stuff. I always like
Yeah.
to ask, it's like, sometimes you go to a community to get, but you also go to give. And I heard you're a great leader in the community. So anything you want to share about kind of, working, peer mentorship and like what you've been able to share and like how you've helped some of our other Rentscale clients?
Yeah, I just think you guys have a nice system down packed. You just have to take it and put it in your own language. Definitely show up for the classes that you all do. I know there's a few. There's one that's like a major class you don't have to come to every month. That was the one about real estate investing. You could probably take that once or twice, but the practice sessions I found to be important, because what you're struggling with, somebody else is struggling with, and just to hear how they overcame a certain scenario will help you as well. So I found the practice has been a big help for me, because sometimes when you isolate it all alone and your nearest rent scale friend is in South Carolina somewhere, you may think you're the only person dealing with this. But when you get on a call, it's like, oh no, we having the same problem. Like when we're starting to slow down as far as calls, I thought it was just a me thing. I thought it was just a us thing. But when we got on the calls, people were like, no, it's been slow. And Reese pulled out the numbers that it's been slow across the board. I was like, oh, it's not just me sucking. It's just a thing. So having that knowledge, and what I did was I told people, so you can stay consistent. That's how you kind of build. Have a you probably can't see. Oh, I have like a script that I follow each and every time to kind of guide a
Nice.
person where I want them to go. And it's
Yeah.
just based on the questions that we ask in rent scale. I said, I said, instead of you trying to fly off the cuff, you may be a person who's good at typing in on the computer, type yours on the computer. If you're good at writing it down, draw it up, write it down, and print out a bunch of copies. And then that gives you a flow to go through so you can get to your presentation, or you can get to the follow up to the home. So that'd be the biggest thing I share with the community. Take all the knowledge and develop you a script or a roadmap, if you will, in which you're going to get to the person to do what you want them to do. So
Good stuff. I really appreciate you sharing all of this, Ben. Everyone in the community has just been very impressed by you. I want to tell you that it trickled up to me. Reese loves working with you. Anything else you want to share before we sign off?
yeah, I'll just say, just to kind of recap, for even your newer season, go back, speak with your accountant and say, hey, who do we pay out far as vendors and real estate agents? And if you can get that list, start calling them first to build up that confidence. Uh, Go hang out in the places in which you manage. Go to those neighborhood bars, make yourself known, introduce yourself to community leaders and say, hey, I manage a few properties over here. if there anything we could do, if I could help you, if you could help me, I just want to open up that line of communication. That'd be like my biggest takeaway is just, get out and have those conversations. But to get your feet wet, definitely start with some people you're familiar with and to get your confidence up, to have those cold call conversations. So,
That's the proactive
oh yeah,
communication I was asking about. Love it,
oh
Ben.
yeah,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome.